Hello, welcome back. It's good to be with you once again. I'm Jim LaPierre. This is Sober Now. Going to be talking today about getting out of your own way and the many ways that we find to do that. As always, very much welcome your questions and comments. Would love to hear from you. What's going on with you today? What's going on in your recovery? Let's talk about anything that's going on with you. If I can be a resource to you, I'm happy to be. But let's get right into it. But before I do, mention that we're streaming on several different formats today, one of which is Sober Now's Facebook page. If you haven't been over there yet, please give it a quick like, and you'll be notified of future live streams and content that we're putting out. And with that, let's get into it. So, getting in your own way it's like being stuck. It's self-limiting behavior. Sometimes it's self-destructive behavior. And I think the most important aspect of it is that it's a subconscious process that stalls our recovery, potentially sabotages our process, and even can lead us towards self-destruction. Uh, it's when you reach that point where maybe you're stagnant, maybe you've become complacent, maybe there's something in your life that you're just not being fully honest with yourself about. There's times in life where we're saying things like, I'm just tired, I'm just depressed, I'm just kind of down, just kind of struggling right now. And that's increasingly common. The further we go into the pandemic, the more I hear from folks that they're just feeling really drained. And it's easy to withdraw, it's easy to stay with what's comfortable. And sometimes what really ends up happening is that we're just kind of ambivalent. I think to most folks, ambivalent means you don't care one way or another. It can also mean I'd like to make more progress. What I need to move past next is too uncomfortable, too scary for me to face. For a lot of folks in 12-step communities, facing step 4 and knowing that those skeletons need to come out of the closet is a place where we find ourselves easily stuck. We want to move forward, we want to continue to make progress, but what we're faced with is so daunting or seems so overwhelming that we just can't imagine taking the next step. And so, of course, there's a world full of things that you can be ambivalent about. I always joke that I eat out in restaurants all the time. So if you and I are going out to lunch and you ask me where do you want to go, I'm going to say that I don't have a preference, and I really am open to going anywhere that you want to go. That's a healthy form of ambivalence. In your recovery, anything that you're ambivalent about, treat that like it's not a red. Treat that like it's a red flag. Treat that like it's something that needs further investigation, and make sure that you treat it as something that you need to be sharing with others. Because the mindset that allowed you to become stalled out or complacent is likely not going to be the mindset that finds the solutions. Sometimes we have blind spots. There's things that we just can't see or don't allow ourselves to see, again, because they're painful or because they're scary. So getting some outside input is invaluable, particularly if the person you're seeking support from is knowledgeable about substance use disorder. If they know you well and can call you out, it's sometimes rare to be able to find people who are secure enough in themselves to challenge us and to name the things that they suspect are going on with us. It's more of often an intuitive process than it is anything that happens through observation. So hopefully you have those folks in your life. If you don't, my experience is that they're pretty abundant in 12-step fellowships. Sometimes you can find them in group therapy or other forms of support groups. Too often I hear from folks how much they want the results but how much they hate the process. The easiest ways that we get in our own way are through overthinking. Overthinking is the idea that we need to figure it out. It's being analytical or jumping into a problem-solving paradigm when what's really going on is that we're scared. And so the whole nature of balance, when I'm doing too much of one thing, I'm doing too little of another. When I'm doing too much thinking, it's because I'm avoiding how I feel and I'm avoiding the course of action that generally I know I need to take. Sometimes I don't know, and that's the upside. That's one of the appealing ways one of the appealing reasons that we get stuck is because when you don't know what to do, Nothing is required of you. There's literally nothing to do because you don't know what to do. So we have to be willing to ask for help, and we have to stop hiding our confusion, our lack of understanding, our lack of follow through. And it's what my friends in AA sometimes refer to as telling on yourself. Just share with folks, this is what I'm going through right now. I need some ideas, or I need some input about what is it that I'm missing. When we're overthinking, we're looking for softer, gentler ways to overcome or get around whatever it is that's in our path currently. And we get in our own way when we complicate things because, again, we're avoiding how it feels, we're avoiding taking action, and just having a willingness to move outside of that mindset. Always healthy to take a break from it, always healthy to be of service to others, always healthy to turn your attention to something that you know needs doing, but making sure that you're externalizing what it is that you're struggling with. Journaling is a great way to do that. Just free writing, just putting down on paper everything that's going through the hamster wheel and bringing it out into the open because it's far more amenable to change. Talking with a mentor, a sponsor, a counselor, and just allowing yourself to just pour everything out on the table and letting them help you sort it out. Two minds aren't twice as good as one. They're a million times better than one. I think this is a place, too, where we have to try our best to notice how we describe things. Too often we're rationalizing, justifying, and minimizing our experience, and too often we're unwittingly devaluing ourselves. Notice when you're using words like just. I'm just tired, or it's just me, or I just need to get through this. We live in the idea that life will be better when we get there, this next step in the process. And what I've learned, especially in the ongoing nature of being a work in progress, is that there's always going to be another there to get to. So just going to check the streams real quick. Again, would love to hear your questions and comments today. What's going on with everybody? And of course, if you're watching the stream long after the fact, drop me a comment. Let me know what's going on with you. Would love to hear from you. Okay. I think quite often we find that when stress is running high, whether that's financial stress or relational stress, or just competing demands in our life, sometimes it's not something bad that's happening, it's that we have a lot of competing demands in our life. We have a lot of goals, and sometimes the standards that we hold ourselves to, the expectations that we have of ourselves, easily make life unmanageable. And this too is a place where we have to be willing to get some outside input, because part of having an addictive personality or an addictive brain is that it never really feels like it's quite enough, right? And so even when we're doing positive things, even when we're moving in a healthy direction, we still have a tendency to do too much. We still have a tendency to treat our limits like the only reason they exist is to be pushed. And sometimes just sitting down and talking with somebody about what's going on in your life today and what are all of the things that you're doing. I used to joke that I was okay until somebody asked me, so what do you do? And I'd be like, well, okay, that's a long list. And it was part of my insanity that it never occurred to me that working 2 jobs and working overtime in 2 jobs, and by the time I added up all of the responsibilities in my life and being a dad and managing so many other things, that it started to sound insane by the time I poured it all out. And yet, that's how subtle expectations are. They're subconsciously developed and maintained, and too often one of the easiest ways that we get in our own way is by not managing time, not managing our health physically, not getting enough sleep, of course, leaves us emotionally raw, makes everything feel like it's much harder. We tend to, I think, have expectations of ourselves that are radically different than what we expect of other people. It's a lesson I've learned in a lot of different ways. What is it that I wanted to expect from my children? and realizing that I taught them by my example to expect a little too much. In a perfect world, they'd only learn by what we tell them, but of course they learn by what it is that we model for them. I learned this lesson when I started supervising people in my fields, that I didn't want them to overwork themselves. I didn't want them to push too hard. I learned this lesson emphatically as an employer, that I don't want my folks to be constantly exceeding their limitations, because that inevitably leads to being drained. As the expression goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. We have a tendency, of course, to justify everything that we're doing, and particularly when the things that we're involved in the course of our recovery are good things, then it feels like we shouldn't even need to consider it. They're good things, we need to do them. Sometimes we tell ourselves that we're making up for lost time. We have this expectation that whatever point we are in recovery, that we should probably be further along than we are. We have a sense that our chronological age sometimes is a factor. It's always amazing to me when I talk with people about their struggles and how long they've been in recovery and how long they've been in different types of treatment. They almost inevitably will tell me that they should be so much further along. They should have made more progress by now. They shouldn't need the level of support that they do. And I just ask them to notice that, and to consider whether or not they would ever say those things to another person, especially somebody that they cared about. Noticing your self-talk can be a really effective way to get out of your own way, because chances are you don't ever talk to people the way you talk to you. You're not as critical, you're not as demanding. And what I often hear from folks by way of justification is they say, well, I'm just hard on myself, or I just have really high expectations. And I'll say, no, if you listen real closely to your self-talk, it's not just critical or demanding, it's abusive, it's mean-spirited, it's rejecting. And for too many of us, this is what we learned about self-control. When you grow up afraid, when you grow up in unhealthy environments and you don't get what you need, you learn to hide everything that you feel, you learn to white-knuckle your way through fear. And the rejection of self is oftentimes what the child has to do to force him or herself to do the thing that is scary to do. So my hope is that a little bit at a time, we'll move away from ambivalence. We'll move towards making life more manageable. I'm mindful that we can always go back to step one, because when we're overwhelmed or when we're really struggling, chances are there's some amount of powerlessness that's involved in our struggle. Powerlessness is, I think, one of the most important lessons that we can learn spiritually. It's unique. Powerlessness is not helplessness. It's not hopelessness. It's simply not having control. So whenever folks are overwhelmed or feeling like they're stuck, one of the first things I'm going to ask is, can you just sort out what do you have control over and what don't you? I often think of my friend artist. She would say that control is an addict or alcoholic's number one character defect. If we don't feel like we're in control of everything, we feel like we're out of control of ourselves. And so surrender as a spiritual practice is a great way to get out of your own way. Asking your higher power to take care of the things that you cannot is a very effective way to simplify things. But if you're like me, you struggle with your faith. You struggle, especially in the first few years of recovery, to have a sense of what it is that you believe and what it is that you can expect from a higher power. Psychology tells us that most people tend to relate to a higher power in a way that's similar to how they related to their caregivers, their parents, their primary loved ones growing up. And so sometimes I think folks are afraid of asking for too much. It's always fascinating to me to talk with folks about how they pray, because they'll typically put themselves last. They'll ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars for people they love, but what they ask for themselves is very limited. And even when we have something really heavy that we're struggling with, whether that's depression or anxiety or some type of condition, we never really seem to ask our higher power to just take that away or to give us the opportunities, the learning experiences, put the people and the situations in my path that I need to overcome this. I think our expectations of a higher power tend to be unexamined. We keep them very minimal, and we don't ask for what we need. Too often, staying in this kind of ambivalence, there's an expression for being on the fence, and that's a false sense of security. When you're sitting on the fence, you're firmly planted in not moving forward. Oftentimes we're trying to resist looking at our past, but this is what stagnation is. This is just being passive. It's allowing life to pass you by and not investing further. It makes me think of a Dave Matthews song where everything is kind of peaceful but kind of melancholy and just vaguely depressing. Every time I listen to Dave, I kind of want to reach out to him and ask him if he's found a good therapist yet, because, man, judging from his lyrics, he just can't seem to get out of his own way, and he can't seem to bring himself to let go of that pain. Going through the processes of recovery mean allowing ourselves to grieve. They mean allowing ourselves to face fear and ensuring that we don't have to face it alone. We're people who crave comfort. We crave familiarity because we confuse it with predictability and security. The fact that we can see how things are going to unfold might give us some sense of stability, but too often what's inherent in that process is settling for far less than we can have. We're people who are resistant to change, and that's a big part of what keeps us in our own way. We tell ourselves that we're just not going to take risk. We talk ourselves into settling, and it is all typically compromises and sacrifices that are made to have a sense of safety, to have a sense that things are okay. And this, of course, inevitably leads to being stuck, which leads to depression, because it's all just the same old stuff. We're going back to what's familiar. A counselor would say that we're regressing. When we go back to the familiar, too often we behave in immature ways. We are people who tend to be emotionally immature, and the course of recovery is very much a process of growing up. And so we have to get comfortable with ourselves, with the process, and be willing to explore further. Thank you for writing in, Jimmy Mac. I appreciate the kind words. Sarah, I always feel like you're targeting me in these videos. I hear that from folks quite a bit. I've had a number, probably a few hundred times that I've posted a particular blog or a video, and folks get mad and say, okay, so you just told my life story. This is actually another way in which we get in our own way. My friends in AA call it being terminally unique. We decide that there's nobody who's quite as weird as we are, quite as fucked up as we are, or sadly, sometimes we decide that there's nobody who's quite as bad as we are, whether that's in terms of our addiction, our drug of choice, how much we used, how long. Sometimes it's about having a criminal history. Sometimes it's about the things that we did to get drugs and the shame that we continue to live with today. And it's this fundamental difference that I always come back to. There's this huge contrast between how we judge ourselves and how we judge other people. We don't judge other people by our past, but we do that to ourselves. Ideally, we judge people by who they're becoming today, by what their goals are, by what they're trying to become. And this is another place where you can just kind of monitor that self-talk that you have and say, okay, would I talk to a friend this way? If I was trying to encourage or support somebody's recovery, would I see it this way? Would I be critical of them this way? And no, obviously you wouldn't. Sometimes I'm asking folks, listen, whose side are you on? And like, how about if it was yours? As simple as that sounds, I think it's an important consideration. Too often we're listening to the old tapes, those internalized messages from different points in our life that were especially painful. And what we're listening or judging ourselves by are the beliefs and values of our abusers or just other sick people who happen to be in our path. So I think the opportunity obviously is to connect with healthy people, and that's great, but of course, healthy people scare the shit out of us. We have a tendency to look at people with long term recovery or folks who seem to be experiencing a lot of success in their lives, and we put them on pedestals. We tell ourselves that we shouldn't bother them, burden them, impose on them. We make up a lot of excuses about why we're not going to reach out to them. And what's really tragic about that is we make it about them. They're too busy, right? They have more important things to do. When the reality is it's our fear that's keeping us stuck. It's our very limited comfort zone that's keeping us stuck in the place we're in. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone, right? I think we've all seen that meme, but it's true. Everything you want, particularly in the first few years of recovery, is typically everything that you fear, and we have to be willing to move outside of that. Growth and healing don't take place in your comfort zone. Achieving your goals, having a better career, having a better relationship with your partner, your children, reconnecting with your family doesn't happen inside of your comfort zone. And there's a myriad of things that we do to ourselves that get us stuck and get us trapped in our own way. One of the biggest ones is projection. We tend to decide how other people see us, how they think of us, how they feel about us. And of course, what we're projecting is our judgment of self, our feelings about ourselves, and we decide that everybody else feels the same way. I joke with people in recovery, particularly my friends in recovery from alcoholism. I will often say to them, have you considered the possibility that it's not all about you? We're egocentric in a way that is not egotistical. We're not doing this out of narcissism or because we believe we're better than. The expression that I've heard old timers use is, I'm not much, but I'm all I can think about. Or, what's the other one? I'm the most important piece of shit in this room. So sometimes we're coming from a place of very low self-worth. We're feeling very poorly about ourselves. And we decide that other people think the same way, see the same things, and feel the same way, which, of course, that is another AA expression that I dearly love. It goes, you know what people think about you? They don't. Can we be open to the possibility that maybe people just don't give a shit one way or another because they're wrapped up in their own problems? Can we be open to the possibility that virtually everyone, especially in early recovery, struggles with social anxiety? All of us struggle with our self-image. All of us have a distorted or a warped perception of self. And it's really about unlearning how we were taught to view ourselves, what we were taught about what our worth is. We have to be willing to change those things. And that starts with really simple things like take a damn compliment. Accept recognition and praise. Accept validation and affirmation. We're people who kill ourselves to earn something good, but we're too uncomfortable to receive it, so we end up deflecting and pushing away the very things that we've killed ourselves to get. Recognize what your needs are. This is one of the 3 hardest questions that I ask people as a therapist. Most every week I'm asking, how are you? And let's get rid of the automatic answer that you have to that, because what folks say automatically is good, fine, okay. Let's treat how are you as a real question. At some point in our society it became a greeting, which really is horrible. But take stock. How are you? And then what is it that you need? For most of us that's hard. If what we need is something that's essential to life, like a place to live, a job, transportation, healthcare when we're ill, those kind of needs are easy to identify. Everything else is something that we've been conditioned from since childhood not to have an awareness of, not to have an expectation that our needs would be fulfilled. We deny them, we minimize them. And what do you want? That's a pretty vital question. As long as we put needs first. Needs have to come before wants, because that's the whole nature of recovery, is that we build that foundation, we start building that life, and the more that we attain whatever our pathway to recovery is, and the more that we show accountability and responsibility in our lives, Progressively, what we want is something that becomes a goal, something that becomes what we asked our loved ones for, and we can embrace vulnerability. Vulnerability is not only the key ingredient to intimacy, it's a way to improve all communication. It improves every relationship, assuming that the person you're talking with is a good person, a healthy person. And it unlocks getting our needs and wants met. It unlocks all of the confusion that we profess to feel when we're not sure how we feel or what's going on with us. It allows us to talk about the things that people don't talk about. Intrusive thoughts, nightmares, flashbacks, the feeling of despair, the feeling of just being profoundly discouraged. So much of what we tend not to talk about are the things that actually cause us to be stuck in our own way the most. So I hope that you'll take a minute and just reflect on some of those things. This is a heavy topic, and it's especially heavy as we continue to go through COVID. These are very strange times, and things feel a little bit heavier than they usually do. I often recommend, that's a song, Linkin Park did Heavy, and a lot of themes about recovery in there, from substance use disorder, from trauma, and from mental illness. So check that one out if you don't already know it. I'm going to be wrapping up in just a minute, but as always, I want you to connect with me. The easiest way to do that is jim@sobernow.com. Email me, let me know what questions you have, where are you struggling in your recovery. Let me know what topics you'd like to see covered in future live streams. I love getting requests. Check out our YouTube channel. Go over to YouTube and just look up Sober Now, and if you subscribe to the channel, there's over 160 videos there now on different aspects of recovery, completely free, of course. And then please check out our site, sobernow.com. We fairly recently moved to a subscription service, so for under $15 a month, you have access to a 28-day home study program. It's go at your own pace, completely confidential, and maintains anonymity. So you're able to start exploring strategies for whether you're starting your recovery or building upon what you already have. And then we have a separate 28-day home study program for affected others, for people like me who have loved ones in active addiction or maybe early recovery, exploring the ways in which addiction harms not only the person who's in active use, but the family as well. So check out those resources. Please take excellent care of you. I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.